In the late 2000s, it was 60s and 70s domestic muscle cars that were shattering auction records. Then came along the air-cooled Porsche bubble that made a ton of really good entry-level 911s nearly unattainable in the 2010s. But eventually these bubbles popped and the hype moved to the next segment of cars that more accurately accounted for the nostalgia of the next generation of buyers. Today, we're at peak classic JDM demand, mostly due to the fame surrounding these cars thanks to a few very successful select films and animes. These are cars that used to present a lot of value but now cost far more than the performance that they actually deliver in the real world. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Over Under. I'm Sean, SeanB.fi on Instagram, and today we're going to be talking about the 5 most overrated JDM cars right now. But before we jump directly into it, you might be wondering, what the hell am I wearing on my head and where can I get one for myself? Well, this is part of our new giveaway merch. This time we teamed up with Rotoform to create some awesome new merch for you guys, and that includes the incredibly versatile bucket hat that doubles as a cowboy hat. And we got some incredibly banging t-shirts for you guys, and of course every $5 you spend gets you entered to win a set of Rotoform friggin' wheels. Get yours before they're gone, they're not gonna last long. And of course make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and head over to fitmentindustries.com to browse the most comprehensive wheel, tire, and suspension store of all time. While you're there, make sure to add your car to the gallery if you have wheels, tires, or suspension. And we even started doing car review vlogs over there, so go check that out after you finish this video. And make sure to stick around for the last car on this list. You're really not gonna like what I have to say about this JDM legend. Let's get started. Well, let's just go ahead and rip this band-aid right off. The first car on this list is gonna have to go to the S13 Nissan 240SX. No, I'm not referring to the S chassis as a whole, but more specifically the US spec 240SX. As the Nissan Silvia continuously gained reputation for being a monster on the street with its turbocharged SR20 that had tons of easily accessible power potential. The 240SX that came stateside got the friggin' shaft, as did us Americans hoping to finally have a JDM sports coupe that could take on your typical American sports car offerings of the time. But instead of getting the potent SR20 DET that you could easily squeeze more power from, our only option was a friggin' KA24E, a single overhead cam naturally aspirated engine that produced a whopping 140 horsepower. These cars barely outperformed the cheaper, lighter, and more nimble Miata at the time, and then come 1991, Nissan was ready to give the little 240 that couldn't a competitive edge. So they gave us a dual overhead cam 2.4 liter KA24DE with a massive 15 horsepower bump. But because of the reputation of the S chassis as a whole, these cars were devoured by enthusiasts, creating such a large demand that Nissan didn't really even need to change the car to keep selling them. Then, as the cars became older and cheaper, the lightweight, nearly perfect wheelbase front engine rear drive chassis that these cars offered turned out to be a really good choice for motorsport. So as time went on, a lot of them were chopped up, neglected, crashed, smashed, and Frankensteined together into track rats and drift missiles. To this day, the 240SX still carries the Silvia and big power race car reputation, but with an added twist. Now, clean examples of these cars are hard to come by and have aged, where nostalgia has become a factor, putting the 240SX back to a price that is more expensive than it's actually worth compared to the car it directly competes with. Earlier this year, a low-mile S13 240SX sold on Bring a Trailer for $20,000. Do you know how much car you can get for $20,000? You could buy a daily, a fun weekend car, and a track rat, all with double the horsepower for a little bit less money. And for that reason, I dubbed the S13 240SX overhyped and overrated. Next up on the chopping block goes out to a car that holds the title of being the best-selling 2-seat convertible ever produced. The Mazda Miata was introduced to the world in 1988 for the 1989 model year and was a massive success. The NA Miata is light, it's nimble, it's well-balanced, economical, and it's fun to drive, so it's no wonder why these things landed in the hands of thousands of enthusiasts. But when it came to lackluster features and performance, the Miata was a notch or 12 below the competition. People more often than not consider the Miata to be a sports car or even a performance-oriented car when it's really not. The cars barely made over 100 horsepower, had tiny little baby tires, and had brakes made for ants. Now, I've talked to enough Miata owners to know exactly what they would say to that.
Meet me on track, bro.
And to that I say gladly. A boat on a trailer on the back of a truck would probably lap a Miata on a full-size circuit. And this is where my biggest gripe with the Miata comes from. Just because a car with a
tiny wheelbase
can be successful on an autocross course does not mean it's a capable track car. But that's what everybody who owns one seems to think. Sure, they're balanced and can absolutely be a fun weekend warrior and teach you a ton about cars and driving that you may struggle to find elsewhere, but they're not good cars. They're full of compromises that the purists refuse to talk about. In fact, purists are the reason that these cars have falsified hype behind them. And with hundreds and thousands of them on the road, they've become cult-like and can sway the market with their BS claim. For that reason, the NA Miata is overhyped, overappreciated, slow as and overrated. The Subaru Impreza 22B STI is arguably one of the best looking cars of all friggin' time. It's wider and more powerful. It has better differentials and shorter gears than the standard WRX at the time. And in 1998, it was one of the best performing JDM cars and one of the only JDM performers to gain superstardom, shooting to 60 in a super slang 4.3 seconds, which is actually even quicker than a brand new 2020 STI, oddly enough. And I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing, but not a lot of manufacturers these days have a performance model from the 90s that outperforms their most modern rendition of the car today. Now, contrary to the rest of the cars featured on this overrated segment of this over-under series, the 22B, based on my research, doesn't fall into the false claims and don't drive your heroes category. And maybe that's partially due to the whole it outperforms the newest one thing, or perhaps they under-promised and over-delivered. Either way, this is the one people pay buku bucks for, and I'm talking crazy money, like 6 figures money for a Subaru. The 22B is undoubtedly a fantastic automobile and all, but it's not $100,000 fantastic. I mean, come on. I know it has 2 less doors and has limited production, but a Bly-By STI is 95% of the performance for 20% of the cost. And that's absolutely friggin' bonkers. That reason, the Subaru Impreza 22B STI is way overpriced and overrated. Next up is a car that became famous by delivering tofu during the day and being the underdog slaying canyons at night. Of course, I'm talking about the AE86 Corolla. In Initial D, Takumi is beating drivers on the Togue in cars that are much faster than his car in a Toyota Corolla. However, fanboys' dreams of the capabilities of the AE86 never lived up to the reality of what the AE86 really is. Its 0 to 60 mile an hour time is about 8.5 seconds. And to put things into perspective, a 1997 Toyota Camry was an entire friggin' second faster. The AE86 is the opposite of a sleeper. They are expected to be fast, but they are not. It's a lot like a Miata in a sense. Again, it's a small, lightweight, balanced, nimble car, but it's not necessarily about performance. It was more or less a well-engineered economy car that was fun to drive. But because of its fame gained through Initial D, these cars are selling for 2 to 3 times the price that they would be if the market was based around the car and what it offers versus emotions via nostalgia. You would be hard-pressed to find an AE86 base model in fair condition for under $12,000. That's a bit much considering it's a 40-year-old Toyota Corolla with 128 horsepower. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd love me an 80s hatchback with sharp lines and pop-up headlights, but the AE86 is overhyped, overpriced, and overrated. Now I'm gonna need y'all to sit the frick down for this last one because your kneecap's about to blow clean off damn legs. The R34 Nissan Skyline GTR is overrated. Right there, I said it. But look, I have a point, okay? The R34 GTR is probably the most guilty of becoming encapsulated in a bubble of false hype simply based on fame. Like, take the DeLorean, for example. DeLoreans are friggin' trash. It's an unpainted 136 horsepower ball of terribleness. But since it was in a friggin' movie doing cool stuff, people adore DeLoreans. It's stupid, just like the R34. The technology in the car is incredibly outdated and outdone by the cars of today's era. Even when it was new, it was still inferior to other cars of the era, whereas many domestic cars had more power, better handling, offered more fun, and were overall better cars than the Skyline for less money. Even within Japan itself, the Skyline was less powerful and slower than the equally overrated Supra. It's almost like if the old colored matte computers started skyrocketing price and then people started claiming, but it's a more pure driving experience and has character. Knock that off. Look, the car is neat, it's aggressive, and for the time, it made acceptable power and has some good tuning potential, being turbocharged from the factory and all. R34 GTRs you see slaying the streets have tons of money invested in them. And the ones you see dominating its competition in movies are not real representations of the car and its performance. It's the perfect example of what pop culture can do to the value and the reputation of a vehicle. These cars are hard to find under six-figure price tags. Do you know what that means? That means that you could buy a far superior R35 GTR for less money than an R34. And for that reason, the R34 Skyline GTR is massively overhyped, overpriced, and overrated. But that about wraps up our tour on the Triggermobile. Be sure to leave a comment about what cars you think are overrated and what you think I got wrong. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We upload every single freaking day and you're not gonna wanna miss any of the fun. Head over to fitmentindustries.com for all of your wheel, tire, and suspension needs. And while you're there, check out our car review blogs. I'll leave a link to these in the description. I'm Sean from Fitment Industries, SeanB.fi on Instagram. Please don't hate me. Peace.